hold on.
You're tangled. You need
I'm
help.
tangled in. Gotta get over the wires here. This really feels like a homecoming for me because for the last almost 10 years, I've been going to Tucson, Arizona every winter and have had the good fortune of working at a shelter called Casa Alitas, which is about 40 miles from the Nogales, Sonora, and Nogales, Arizona border. And so I've been able to meet people from all over the world and help them begin their journey to all different parts of the country, including Maine. And so we thought it might make sense for me to talk a bit about what that journey is like for people when they first arrive. But first, I'd like to ask a question of all of you, and that is just to think a minute and think about, when you think about immigrants and people coming here, what words immediately come to mind based on the information you've been receiving in the media? You could just shout out words as you think of them.
Fear.
I was gonna say, I'm scared.
Scared? Mm-hmm.
Unworthy.
Unworthy?
Anxious.
Unappreciated.
Mm-hmm.
Desperate.
Exploited.
Desperate.
Exploited?
Persecuted.
Yeah. And how has the media been describing these people?
Criminals.
Yes.
Correlate.
Criminals.
People who eat dogs.
Yeah. Dog eaters.
Murderers.
Murderers. Yeah. Yeah.
Necessary agricultural workers. Bloodlessly like that.
Yeah. Aliens. Illegals. Rapists. Criminals.
Or dealers.
Dealers, drug dealers, the fentanyl, they're bringing over the fentanyl. So I'd like to start by, if I can do this right, this is the right clicker thing. There,
Oh.
this is what they look like. They gave me permission to take this picture. And they crossed the southern border with their children. And time again, in different languages, people would explain to me that they don't want to leave their homes, they didn't want to leave their home. But I love the analogy that if you're in a burning house with your children, what are you going to do? You're going to sit there? You need to leave your home and find safety. And America still, well, not these days, but from 2017 till recently, has always been a place where people have been told that it would be safe to come to, that it would be difficult, and their journeys are incredibly arduous just to get to the border. Going through the Darien Gap, riding on top of La Bestia, the train that goes through Mexico. And I've seen people that survived falling off that train. I've heard stories about what they've seen in the Darien Gap as they're carrying their babies on their backs. It's just extraordinary what they go through. So they arrive, and they cross the border. These pictures were taken at the shelter where I worked, and she was singing when I took it discreetly. They cross the border and get met by Border Patrol. This is the way it used to be. I want to back up a little bit to when Trump's first administration, before Remain in Mexico policy was put into place. They would cross the border, get picked up by the Border Patrol, and then taken to ICE. And ICE has a detention center in Tucson. Legally, they're only supposed to keep people for 3 or 4 days max. While they're with ICE, they give a credible fear interview with ICE, at which point ICE decides whether or not they could proceed with asylum or be immediately deported. More often than not, back in 2017, 2018, 2019, they were deemed appropriate to be in this country, to file asylum, and to go to an immigration hearing. Those immigration hearings take place all over the country, and the people that arrived would have a sponsor. They would either have a friend or a family member or a community center that they would tell ICE about. So ICE would give them an appointment in that area, way down the road because of the backlog with courts, for them to go to an immigration hearing. They then got papers with a federal number that said that they were legally here until they go to that immigration hearing, and then at that point, the courts would decide whether or not they could proceed and stay here or be deported. So that was the process. Now that's not happening anymore. People are not arriving at the border, number one, because they're not allowed really even to get that far. And the few that do are immediately picked up and put into detention to await deportation. So the law that was passed in 1980, the Refugee Resettlement Act, that helped both refugees and asylum seekers have a legal pathway to become members of our communities here in this country, has been pretty much thrown out the window. Anyway, back up. Families would come to the shelter. They would be dropped off in big white buses by ICE. They would stay 2 or 3 days, at which point they could eat, get a change of clothing. I was in charge of the tienda, which had clothing and shoes and hygiene supplies for people, and come together as a community and think about next steps. Go to a help desk. We had bilingual people that would help them get bus tickets, not pay for them, the sponsors paid for them. No tax dollars paid for the transportation. Or airplane tickets, depending on their resources. And then they would leave Tucson after staying with us for a couple of days and go to Maine or to Minnesota or to Texas or to wherever it was. The fun part for me in the tienda was explaining to people from Honduras, for example, who had never seen a winter, that if you're going to Minneapolis, you really need to have a hat and gloves, and oftentimes it'd be the first time that anybody tried on a hat or gloves or a warm coat. And so there was a lot. It was a really lovely opportunity to connect with people. Anyway, so, oh, am I doing the wrong? There it is. Oh, I'm going backwards.
I would use the arrow keys on the computer.
There we go. There's another. We had so many volunteers that would knit and crochet blankets and hats and bring them and drop them off for mostly families and children in 2018, 2019. And then there was COVID. That's a whole other story I won't get into. But the last couple of years, it's been interestingly a lot of people from Eastern European countries, China, Russia, thinking about them coming across the southern border is interesting. Like, how the heck did that happen? So many, many different people from all over the world. That was at the shelter in 2018, 2019. Families and kids. Okay, so I just wanted to tell 2 quick stories, and I'll start with this one. The place, Casalitas, offered an opportunity to hear stories that really described the inhumanity of man and how people treat people badly, both on their journey to the States and also sometimes after they arrived and crossed the border. Stories of Border Patrol dumping out backpacks and, people's paperwork and pictures and religious icons and just making them leave it there, and then they take them to ICE, where they stayed in what they called the freezer, because it was so cold. They slept on a floor with Mylar blankets for 2 or 3 days, and they served them frozen burritos without zapping them, so just literally frozen burritos, and then dropped them off at our place where we heard stories about families and what they'd been through. And this family here, you see a brother and a sister right there. When I met them, we were sitting at a table outside the tienda, and the mom was there. They had just arrived, and she had her head in her hands, and I asked in my Spanglish, "Are you tired? You look tired. Is everything okay?" And she explained to me that she had arrived with her 3 children, one of whom had just turned 18 the day before they arrived. And so ICE took the 18-year-old girl away from the family and took her to a detention center, and they had no idea where she was. And so she was dealing with that trauma and was in shock when she first arrived to us. They stayed for 3 or 4 days, at which time we worked very hard. They were going to New York to help them find their daughter. There's a big database of the ICE where you can look up where people are at. And we found the daughter, we found out where she was. And we organized a reunion in New York, lined up an immigration attorney working with some of the advocates in New York. And so they were finally able to be reunited in New York. But those kids, when I first met them, were beside themselves. And we had a garden in the back. These are all raised beds. And after a couple of days, we asked them to help out with the planting of whatever was going on in there. They literally grounded themselves doing that little bit of work. And it just brought to mind to me how these short exchanges between people, given the opportunity, how disastrous it can be on the one hand, and on the other hand, how wonderful it can be to help people just move forward and watch them become hopeful again. So that's one story. Another story is we had a large group for some reason, I don't know why, but for a number of weeks we had many, many people who belong to the Sikh religion, and the guys wear these turbans on their heads. When they arrived and crossed the border, ICE took the turbans, and also took, burqas or prayer for women too, what women used to pray. They took them away. They also took shoelaces right away from every, kids, adults, everybody's shoelaces, and any hair accessories they took. So for the Sikhs, we got big baskets and we had donated fabric. And when people first arrived, they go through intake and there's a certain amount of waiting, and we'd serve water and a little bit of food. And we'd pass around these baskets of fabric so they could make turbans again. And, it just seemed to me just kind of an extraordinary thing that, again, on the one hand, you have someone's identity literally ripped off their heads. And then on the other hand, you have people that are willing to step in and say, okay, but wait, this is not right. We gotta do something about it. And I think that I'm not gonna get political here, but I think that it's just, for me, it was, again, a recognition of the power of the people and how we as a collective group, particularly grassroots organic collective groups, can really make a difference in people's lives. So that was a real gift for me to be there. Oops, backwards again. So the women, their hair accessories would be taken and their kids' accessories would be taken. So they'd rip strips of the Mylar blankets, and that's an example of what that is, and turn them into hair ties or, you know, and continue to brush their children's hair and try to make them, you know, feel like themselves again.
You're gonna go back again.
Back again? Thank you. Okay, so another just glimpse of the shelter, and these are a couple of my colleagues, former pastor Dell, and then Kat Rodriguez on the right, who worked on the help desk. And that's me and my team, some of whom are still there, working there. Oh, go back here. So anyway, quickly, before Kit comes to speak, I just want to do a quick definition of refugees as opposed to asylum seekers, because there's sometimes confusion about that. Refugees are people that are vetted completely outside of this country. So there's psychological tests, there's physical tests, there's all kinds of tests that goes on for months, years. They wait for years to be able to get the permission to come here as a refugee. And so when they arrive here, they're good to go, essentially. My understanding is that that's been curtailed too recently, that kind of program. I don't know all the details, but some people have been hit by that. Asylum seekers are people who have come to the border to seek safety, cross the border, and as they cross the border and step over onto our land, they're being illegal. It's in doing that. But as soon as they speak to the Border Patrol and say, I am here to declare asylum, that gives them the opportunity that I was talking about earlier, to start the process of trying to find a way to become members of this community. And that's all up in the air now. They're not saying that anymore. They're just being picked up and put into detention right now. But the numbers have really tanked. There's not a lot of people crossing right now. So we're going to have question and answers at the end, so I'm sure some of you will have questions and happy to answer them. That's just a quick glimpse of how they get here. And now I'd like to introduce Kit Harrison, who is the editor and founder of Amjambo Africa, the newspaper that I hope you're all familiar with, and also with CAC, Connecting Across Cultures, the group that is working to help our new neighbors here in the Midcoast.
Thank you, Frannie.
Why don't you go around that way?
I think I
There is a
should.
large tangle of
Based on
words
what
there.
she
Yes.
did.
Oh.
I would advocate for that, yes.
Okay. Large tangle, I'm still gonna encounter the large tangle. Okay, great. Hi, everybody. Nice to see you, and hopefully I can be heard. I will try to speak loudly. I am a soft-spoken person, however, but I'll try. So I'm gonna pick up when people arrive in Maine. So Frannie just described arriving in the United States. I've never been to the southern border, and my experience is entirely in this state with this population. So this is an example of a family that did arrive in Maine from a country in Africa, and this particular family arrived as asylum seekers. And asylum seekers can arrive on the border, like Frannie described, on foot, but they can also arrive at an airport or on at a port. There's any way you can get to a country, is you can declare asylum, you can ask for asylum. And that's what this woman and children were doing. So what I want to say is that the refugee program and the asylum seeker program are both basically decimated right now. So by international law, by international treaty, you're supposed to be able to escape war, to escape political persecution, to escape, drought and famine and all the horrible things that happen in the world, and seek a place of safety for yourself and your family. That's, the countries all around the world have agreed on that for a long time.
It's very hard to hear back here.
I would encourage anyone further back who is having difficulty hearing to bring your chairs forward
I can
or to
also-
swap with people who have better hearing.
Yeah,
There's a front seat.
Yeah.
I felt like I was shouting, but I will try harder.
Even standing up makes a difference.
Okay, I'll try that. All right, sorry, I'm just a soft-spoken person.
Thank you.
So anyhow, the refugee program is something that's under international treaty, and it's organized by the United Nations High Commission for Refugees. And what happens is a certain number of refugees are allotted, or countries say, we can accept X number of refugees this year, and presidents get to decide. So it goes up and down depending on who's in charge. Under Obama, it reached the highest number in American history, really, of refugees admitted to the United States in a given year. Under the first Trump administration, that number plummeted. And now he's just canceled the whole thing. So there will be no more refugees admitted into the United States this year, even though the number was set already back in summer. So there would be a certain number of refugees admitted this year, but no, that's just by executive order, that's done. So you can't get into this country anymore that way, which is 100% legal, everything about it is legal. And you can't get here across the border either. You basically just can't get here. So it's really, really devastating because there are millions and there are hundreds of millions of people right now in the world looking for a place to be safe. Now Maine has accepted refugees and asylum seekers every year for a long time, and we have a surprisingly thriving bunch of communities. This woman that you're seeing in this dress was staying in a shelter in Portland. She arrived across the border in her case, and she was from the Democratic Republic of Congo. So we have lots of people in Maine who are here from the Democratic Republic of Congo, from Angola, from Sudan, from Cambodia, from Vietnam, Iraq, Syria, Afghanistan, the Ukraine, Burundi, a bunch of different countries in Africa, Somalia. But it's really interesting. Each state has their own kind of communities. Like, we don't have people in Maine from Myanmar, for example. It just happens that way because one person tells somebody else that they tell somebody else, and Maine has become known as a pretty darn welcoming place. So that's cool, I think. I like that. I mean, I like meeting people from all over the world. We have some fabulous restaurants as a result, etc. But there won't be any more people arriving, and that includes family members. So you might have expected your husband to be coming on the next plane, but that was canceled. So that husband, even if he was vetted and ready to come, is still back in Syria or whatever. Were you gonna ask a question?
Well, I was just gonna say, when you say Nigerians coming from the border when it's Maine, do you mean Canada too, or did they come all the way from Arizona?
Most people come through the southern border.
So, okay.
There is a
No.
small number from Canada, but
Okay.
yeah. And fascinatingly, I mean, what happens is because there aren't enough, you can't come as a refugee, there's such a low number, there was prior. The only choice was to try to get here through the southern border. So people would take airplanes to, maybe to Mexico or maybe to Guatemala or further south and walk. But anyhow, so there's a lot of people living in Maine who got here that way. And needless to say, that's a very resilient group of people and really hard workers, most young families, and a number of those people are living around here. So basically in Maine, I just want to make sure I say the facts, that we have 3 resettlement agencies for refugees. One's in Portland, 2 are in Portland really, and one's in Lewiston. Those are all now in trouble because the federal money has been cut. So they're having to lay off people. There isn't the support system anymore for the people who've come. You know, generally what happens is those resettlement agencies help with clothing, they help with getting jobs, they help with how do you learn English, you know, just the basic stuff. But they're laying staff off because there's no one to pay them. And so this was a shelter that was set up because there was a lot of people who arrived all at once. And that's related to this area, I think, because at the time, the housing was full in Portland and Lewiston, and Brunswick agreed to take over 100 families. And that's where this woman ended up and still lives. So, so what we've got in Maine now is a lot of people from different countries living in southern Maine. The percentage of non-white, the percentage of white people in southern Maine is 84%. In the rest of Maine, it's 96%. So it's really is beginning to shift. We've also got a lot of people living in Lewiston, Auburn, and now Brunswick, Bath. And as people realize, okay, Bath, Brunswick is okay, actually. People like her, she didn't want to go to Bath and Brunswick. It sounded scary to her. Away from the city, not enough community, everyone's white, oh no. But actually people moved there and ended up liking it a lot because the community was so welcoming. And now people go there on purpose. And what's happened is more people are moving here as well because they're hearing, oh, other parts of Maine are okay also. For example, this gentleman is from Burundi. He's a journalist. He actually works for the publication that I co-founded. This child that he's got on his lap is from Afghanistan. She came with, well actually he was born here. He is a citizen. But his 3 older siblings came on a plane with the parents through that crazy tear gas filled airport in Kabul at the time of the fall. And they've built lives in Lewiston. They're wonderful people. And I was introducing them the other day. And you know, I was so worried about that family because it took forever for their asylum case to be heard. Finally it was, and they're all safe. Just in time really, because now they're talking about sending the Ukrainians back, sending the Afghans back. I mean, back to what? Like, you know, it's just incredible. So the enriching nature of having these people join our communities, it really can't be overestimated, I don't think. For example, here's International Women's Day celebrated by some Burundian women. I mean, that was in Lewiston. You know, it's like, just warms you. The journalist I mentioned, he's a journalist in exile. He had to get out of his country because he was targeted during a military coup. Well, these women all went through something like that too. But here they are, happy as can be to be safe in Maine. They love it here. People love it here. It's safe, it's clean, the schools are good, everyone's friendly, they say hi, you know, people have built lives. She's actually in the state legislature. That's a great coffee shop in Portland, if you're ever down there. These people, you know, just getting themselves educated through school, learning English after speaking so many other languages. This is a local group. So we have a local group. It's called Connecting Across Cultures. Frannie helps us out. We have a steering committee. We have various, you know, branches of what we do. We have fun together with families. This is Walker Park. We are trying in these very difficult times to be a support to a number of families that we have come to know and that we've been helping for a period of years. And some of the things that we're helping with are at this time, because people are now terrified. This probably wouldn't be happening anymore. This was happening pre-Trump. People are home. They go to work, they go to school, and then they go home and they close the door. Yeah. They don't want to go to the soup kitchen anymore, the pantry, whatever. They would rather have the food delivered. ask if they should send their kid to school. You know, is it okay to drive to Camden? What do they do if they're stopped? You know, we've given everyone little red cards that you show an ICE agent if they stop you. Done trainings with immigration attorneys. We've communicated with the school systems, you know, how safe are the people? It's a time of great fear. So some people who literally were tortured in their country of origin, this has triggered just, you know, I mean, just enormous fear. So shades are down. I mean, it's really intense, and it's so sad to go from, hey, America's this place that's welcoming me to build another life, to, I'm afraid, you know, this isn't what I thought it was gonna be. This is not what it was last year. I mean, it's just intense. So we're doing what we can in our local group. We always would welcome anyone's volunteer. We are a completely volunteer organization. We're grassroots. We attempt to be organized. We're pretty organized, but we could use some help. And we, you know, like Frannie said, it's just very, very satisfying work, even at this time. It's you know, it's also sad, but then again, it's joyful. So it's all those things. And some people might want to just know that Rockland City Council has a contract with Operation Stone Garden. So this is the kind of thing that local citizens can do if they do not believe that local police should be cooperating with ICE. But they have a contract with Operation Stone Garden, which basically is saying they can't cooperate with ICE. And there's been a number of city council. Operation Stone Garden is a program of the Department of Homeland Security, and it a municipality can sign a contract with them to be in cooperation, and basically then which Rockland has done. And once they do that, the police officers are given these activity logs. I've seen them, you can get them online, and basically they're supposed to write down every contact they've had with an illegal alien. And remember, illegal alien to many people just means you're not white. So Rockland signed that contract before all this happened. They didn't sign it for this purpose. They did not sign it because they want to go harass immigrants. They signed it because they also do things for anti-sex trafficking, drug enforcement. But the point is that once you have that contract, it's a slippery slope. I mean, you know, if we get a police chief in who's anti-immigrant, it could change. They would have the right to start reporting, you know, like, hey, I pulled someone over because their car light was out, and they're from Burundi. They could call ICE up. It can lead to deportation is the point. So all across the country, towns and municipalities are asking their cities to withdraw from those contracts. And there is a motion here. People are trying to get Rockland to do so. So there are actions like that that can be taken, or letters that can be written to the newspapers. And there's definitely our group that we would love more volunteers. So here's happy pre-current administration days with people hanging out together. That's Thomaston, and that's our logo. And this is a small example of the kinds of things we do. So there's a sign-up sheet that Judy's gonna
I'm
put
gonna
on the
leave it here,
table.
and folks can come up and sign up and put your name, email, phone number.
That's it.